What's up everyone, JCrossX here with King Moosh to bring you all the 12th episode of the Class Overview series. For those who aren't familiar, the Class Overview series is a collection of informative videos where we're going to be discussing the different classes in Fire Emblem Three Houses.
We'll be going over general information about each class, like their certification requirements, stats, abilities, and their overall strengths and limitations to determine their viability and what units are a good fit for each class. As per usual, these videos will be gameplay focused, so there shouldn't really be any major spoilers, but I advise you anyways to watch your own discretion, and if you haven't played Three Houses yet, you absolutely should.
This episode is starring the Lord class. A 5-move infantry class has Charm as an innate ability. To certify for Lord, your unit will need to have at least a D+ rank in Sword and a C rank or higher in Authority. Additionally, the only units who can certify for this class are the House Leaders, Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude. Because all of the leaders have a boon in Sword and Authority, this makes acquiring this class by the time you unlock it very easy. Being a physical sword-oriented class means it does not have access to the unit's spell list, but it does have access to Brawling. Additionally, since it is locked to only 3 units, all of which generally specialize in other weapon types, Lord tends to suffer from having an actual use case. As for Lord's skill bonuses, it has 3, those being a +2 to Sword and Authority, and a +1 to Lance. These are decent bonuses as Authority is always nice, and if you are going down a Sword class path, then these bonuses will definitely help in that regard. The Lance growth is pretty negligible and will only ever really be useful on Dimitri.
Moving on to the stats, the base stats of Lord don't stand out very much at all, especially considering how high the base stats of the House Leaders already are. In HP, Strength, Defense, and Res, there is literally zero chance of receiving any stat increases, since the unit bases of all the House Leaders are at least as high as the class bases. Depending on your luck with level ups, it's possible you may receive a point or 2 in Dex, Speed, or Luck, and also Magic specifically for Dimitri and Claude. The stat boosts are pretty decent overall with a +1 in HP, Speed, and Luck. Though a boost to Strength would have been appreciated, these are all pretty useful, and the most impactful stat boost is definitely the +2 to Charm. Since Charm is already a strong statistical area for the House Leaders, this buff just makes them even more consistent at landing and avoiding gambits, which are great benefits to have, and providing a stat boost to Charm is unique among the intermediate classes, so this is something you only get from Lord. The growth rate modifiers are fine as well, with a +20% in HP and +10% in Dex and Charm. Once again, the Charm is a standout, tied for the highest among the intermediate classes, and the other two are pretty useful, though as stated before, it would have been better receive a Strength or even Speed modifier instead. Overall, Lord is a decent class statistically, the growth rates and stat boosts are serviceable enough. It's definitely not a class you promote to for the stats, but you're also not going to be punished statistically for using this class.
Upon mastering the Lord class, your unit will receive the equipable ability of Res +2. Just like beginner class masteries, it increases one of a unit's stats by 2. In this case, that's Resistance. Free stats are generally always good, especially early on, but Resistance is much more niche compared to something like Defense +2 from Soldier for a few reasons. 1. Mages or sources of magic damage are generally much less common in Three Houses compared to physical damage. 2. None of the House Leaders have particularly impressive res bases or growth rates, meaning using them as a res tank doesn't make a lot of sense. And 3. Enemy mages are generally not that fast, as many in the mid and late game use somewhat heavy spells, meaning they'll rarely double you. Comparing this to Defense +2, which generally is often put on slower units, meaning can sometimes be considered Defense +4 due to how often they are doubled, or even Defense +8 if they are being quadded. Res is really impactful on some magic-oriented house members who have decent growths and can bait enemy mages with just their base res, taking very little or sometimes even 0 damage depending on level disparity. As I just mentioned, none of the House Leaders are capable of this. In most situations, you would never really use your House Leader to bait enemy mages or be within range of multiple sources of magic damage. Res +2 could potentially help in scenarios where you're using Soul Blade and Lightning Axe, but this is where the Lord's lack of unit options comes back to hurt it even more, as Edelgard is the only one out of the Lords that get access to Lightning Axe specifically. She also gets a +4 to her res when she waits after Imperial Lineage gets upgraded to Imperial Lineage Plus, which, probably makes her the best user of this since her res growth is the highest at 35, but that isn't too particularly impressive. Overall, Res +2 certainly doesn't hurt, but by the time you unlock it, I would imagine you probably already have 5 equipable abilities that are better, or at least comparable to Res +2 for your House Leader.
Mastering Lord also grants access to the sword combat art Subdue. Unlike a lot of other combat arts obtained by mastering classes, Subdue can be transferred to other classes once it is unlocked. This does come with the unfortunate drawback that it actually takes up a combat art slot rather than being a free extra combat art. Subdue has a relatively low durability cost at -3, and it provides a significant increase to hit rate at +20. However, it does not provide any increases to might or crit rate, and while the accuracy boost is useful, it is the exact same boost as Grounder whichever unit gets at C Sword, so it's hardly anything unique. The main gimmick of Subdue is the special effect that it won't drop enemy HP below 1, making it a non-lethal combat art. While this can be situationally useful for allowing weaker units to pick up easy XP, this effect mostly just makes Subdue useless. Since it won't kill enemies, it guarantees that you will take a counterattack in pretty much all scenarios, and overall it has a negative impact on turn efficiency. With adjutants and XP boosts from the Saint statues, using Subdue for XP purposes is mostly unnecessary. If you're really creative, you might be able to get some value out of this combat art, but overall this is easily one of the worst combat arts in the game and is hardly a selling point for Lord.
We've already highlighted quite a few of its weaknesses, but there are a couple of things I'd like to elaborate on. The masteries, quite frankly, are horrendous, and I don't think I can say that enough. Firstly, Res plus 2 in a vacuum probably wouldn't be the worst plus 2 stat increase for equipable abilities. However, the fact that it's limited to only the 3 lords makes it undeniably the worst one, and I don't see any reason to run on any of them. Usually we look for longevity when comparing these kinds of abilities, but this one doesn't even really have a use case outside of very niche builds, usually on Edelgard. Second, I gotta say Josh put it pretty well with how bad Subdue is. It's basically a more complicated and inefficient way to grind XP compared to others. Being a sword combat art also means you can only acquire sword skill XP while using it too. If you can use attacks on allies, Subdue would be fantastic for setting up Vengeance users, Wrath users, or any other abilities to scale off HP. I'm sure someone will come up with a creative way to use this combat art in the comments, but personally I will stick to the much simpler sword combat arts like Wrath Strike, Bane of Monsters, or Grounder, which are generally just better. At a time where masteries are so important, this class just falls flat. I can't really say it's a strength, but the stats are at least okay. With a selection of units that you won't struggle to get high stats acquired in areas you want, the growth rates being sort of average isn't a big deal, but the bases are just not great unfortunately. There are definitely a lot of classes at the time that give some units an extra point or two, but for Lord's case, it wouldn't be that impactful or even necessary, depending on what stat gets increased like magic on Claude and Dimitri. The skill boosts are somewhat helpful on Dimitri with Lance being thrown in there randomly, but overall the stats are just not enough to save this godforsaken class.
With all that being said, I have to give Lord a rating of 1 out of 10. Throughout the series, we've spoken pretty unfavorably about some classes like Armored Lord and Myrmidon, but compared to Lord, those two seem like pretty decent options. In terms of stats and combat performance, the class is average at best, probably leaning more towards mediocre. And as for the masteries, having 2 masteries doesn't even matter when they're both so awful. This is a stage of the game where the opportunity cost of mastering Lord has to compete with picking up essential abilities like Hit plus 20 and Death Blow, which makes it even worse. If I could pick one of the house leaders that this class is the least bad on, I would give my vote to Dimitri. Claude and Edelgard will both want to master Archer and Brigand, and also possibly Mercenary and Pegasus Knight respectively, but Dimitri only really needs Archer since he is a male enemy phase unit. I would usually much rather spend time in Cavalier, but still the opportunity cost is the least detrimental for him, especially since he gets that plus 2 authority boost, which makes reaching A authority for his Battalion Wrath Vantage combo a little faster. If you're going to use this class, one way to get some more value out of it is by pairing Charm with Leone or Sylvain, depending on which house leader you choose, since their personal abilities stack really well with Charm. As for the tier list placement, we have decided to make the F tier where Lord can stay alone for now. As much as we trashed on some of the classes in D tier, it would honestly be insulting to put them next to Lord. It just has literally nothing going for it compared to any of the other intermediate classes, and it's a complete waste of time to spend any levels in this class when you could be mastering Brigand or Archer or pretty much anything else. In fact, it's worse than a waste of time because you're actively stalling the power growth of your best unit. Most people forget this class even exists, and you're probably better off if you forget about it as well.
That's about all we have to say about the Lord class. If you liked the video, or have any thoughts of your own, please leave a like and make sure to comment.
I also recommend checking the description if you're not already subscribed to both of our channels.
This episode marks the start of the intermediate classes. Stay tuned for episode 13 on King Moosh's channel, where we'll continue down the list with the Mercenary class.